Many of you may be familiar with the act known as IDEA, the Individual with Disabilities in Education Act, also known as Public Law 94-142. That is when this was enacted. In 1975, there was the Education for Handicapped Children Act that was updated every 5 years. And what was important in 2004 and 2006, that students do not have to wait until they are far behind to receive services for students with disabilities. The major components of the law, and you've probably heard of these, the free appropriate public education, which must be provided by the schools, the IEP, the Individualized Education Plan, especially for students that have disabilities, physical disabilities, and this also includes learning disabilities. The least restrictive environment, that the child must be placed in the least restrictive environment. Especially how this relates to our field was that kids with disabilities, particularly physical disabilities, were not allowed to be in a general PE class. So now we have an entire field of adapted physical education that works with kids and works to integrate them into the mainstream PE class. Same thing in academic classrooms. The kids need to be integrated into a classroom. And it seems fair. I mean, if you're the parent of a child with a disability, you want your child to be able to have all the different opportunities that the rest of the children have. So the services are based on age. So these are all done through the school district. And if you notice on the right-hand side of the slide, that has to be provided up to age 21, and it starts at birth. So when you have a child that has a disability, for example, such as Down syndrome or another type of disability that's diagnosed in infancy, the school district provides this type of therapy. So physical development, vision, hearing, emotional development, particularly anything that's going to eventually affect their ability to go to school. Those of you that are interested in working in physical and occupational therapy, this is a good place to work. One of my grad school friends, after she finished her exercise science degree, went on to get her PT degree, and her first job was working in a school district with these kinds of kids. So if they need therapy to be able to sit up, if they need therapy to be able to eat, that was part of her job as a school-based physical therapist. She no longer works for the school district, but she still does work in pediatric physical therapy. So even with infants, sometimes they call these infant stimulation programs. So from infancy on, they're getting PT or OT at the schools. From ages 3 to 21, they must cover all sorts of different disabilities, including, you can see on the list, learning disabilities, autism, probably one of the most common, orthopedic problems, any type of chronic disease such as cancers that children have. So any child that has any type of disability is going to be covered under IDEA. We'll spend a lot of time on the Americans with Disabilities Act. So this was a major act in 1990 to prevent discrimination on the basis of disability. You have all grown up with the ADA Act being in effect. So things were not really always as accessible as what they are now. So when we look at accessibility and wheelchair access and for people with other mobility issues, a lot of this came about as a result of the Americans with Disabilities Act. 5 sections, and you can see them here: employment, public services, public accommodations and services operated by private entities, telecommunications, and other miscellaneous provisions. So we'll go into a little bit more detail on each one of these. Major barriers to employment: transportation. So now you see public transit is accessible now. Public services, community access, access to restaurants, access to public buildings, and telecommunications. So Assistive devices for persons who maybe have a visual or hearing impairment or who have a mobility impairment. All of these are as a result of the Americans with Disabilities Act.